Hello, everyone, and welcome to our presentation. This is on a focus group that we conducted where we met with a bunch of students and we were basically looking into Marist's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic on campus. So some basic intro to start. Obviously, COVID has affected everyone this year. It brought about unforeseen circumstances for everyone, but especially with colleges, they had to adapt to a scenario where they had to decide whether they wanted to hold on-campus instruction or just go fully online. And Marist was one of the schools that committed to being on campus in the fall and having some form of in-person instruction. So with that in mind, we decided to conduct our focus group with around the research question of what are students' feelings and opinions about Marist's handling of the fall semester during the COVID-19 pandemic. With this in mind, some of the objectives that we hope to learn from our focus group and gather from our focus group was one, what did students feel about the academics that took place this semester? Did they feel that Marist did a good job and still had a successful academic format? Was there certain functions of online education that they preferred over others, such as hybrid, asynchronous, and other forms? Also, we wanted to look into social life. How were students' day-to-day lives affected because of the pandemic and the rules and regulations that Marist had put in place? And with rules and regulations, the third objective that we also wanted to look into was Marist COVID policies and what students thought of those, whether they were too harsh, not harsh enough, or did a good job of keeping students in check while also providing a good semester for the students. So some of the literature review that we conducted for this study was about the education amid the coronavirus. This was conducted in a journal, the International Journal of Science, Technology, and Management. And what this looked into was the various education formats that had been taught throughout the semester of this past fall semester at different colleges. One of the studies that they did when they were interviewing students and conducting studies with students was looking at the level of satisfaction that students had when it came to online lectures. And as you can see by the statistics there, it was pretty split, 29% and 21% splitting how satisfied they were, with obviously 50% of them just being in the middle as satisfied with the online lectures. And then also we looked into the level of understanding that students had when it came to online lectures, where there was much more of a split, as 56% said that they did understand the materials, even though it wasn't an online format, and less said that they were unable to or had poor understanding of the material. So we were seeking, with this in mind, to look into Marist students' views on the various forms of online education and see if they matched up with these studies, or just what Marist students' general feelings were about the online formats that were in place this semester. And then another aspect that we looked into was just on-campus virus protection. An online study that was conducted, well, it wasn't really a study, but an online article conducted by the JAMA Network online scholarly article. They were looking into some of the preventative measures that schools could take going into COVID to limit the spread of the virus on campus. Mandatory mask wearing, physical distancing, and hand hygiene were all included in their article. And obviously Marist had rules and regulations in place for all of these. But it also came down to the social settings as being a key area that was going to be important for whether schools were going to be able to stay on campus or have to close the campus early than the end of the semester because of COVID. So those were two things that this article looked into, and we wanted to see what Marist students' opinions were on whether the school did a good job of handling on-campus virus prevention, and with their rules and regulations.
So going into the method, first we looked at the characteristics of our participants, and we did that by distributing a demographic survey with just like a couple of questions. One of those questions was their gender. So we had 8 participants overall, and 7 of them were female, with 1 being male. We also asked about their housing, because that would obviously be a big factor that impacts them and how they feel about Marist handling the pandemic. So 6 were on-campus housing, and 1 was off-campus housing, and 1 was at home for the majority of the semester. We also found that 6 of them, which was 75%, said that Marist handled the pandemic good, and 2, which was 25% of the participants, said that they handled the pandemic moderately. So we didn't have anyone that actually said that they handled it like bad. So going into the roles that each of the researchers had, so the moderator was Nick, and the moderator's job was basically to guide the discussion and transition between subtopics. Then we had an assistant moderator, which was me, Danielle, and I helped pose questions, and I also conducted the demographic survey. And then we had the note takers, which was Emily and Ricardo, and they took note of like important parts of the responses of each of the participants. We organized the subtopics between, first we started with education and online learning and how the participants felt about that. And then we transitioned into social activities such as like clubs and organizations. And we then went to the COVID policies that Marist enforced this semester. And then we ended it with future expectations for next semester. We also talked about the pauses on campus, like that was a important part of our discussion. And during the discussion, as researchers, we tried to remain neutral. So we didn't like outright agree or disagree with any of the things said by the participants, but we also tried to encourage participation by listening attentively and like nodding our head and yeah.
So moving on to the results of the interview. So some of the themes and quotes. The first one being overall, Marist did a good job of handling the COVID on campus. Most agreed that Marist exceeded expectations. The second theme being lack of communication with regards to rules and punishment. The rules weren't clear at all, and many students were afraid of accidentally breaking the rules. And there are also different definitions of parties and social gatherings. The third theme is people found online and / hybrid classes easier than in-person classes. In-person class was more engaging and brought more of a connection. The fourth theme being clubs and activities were much more convenient online and was more successful than most expected. So one of our participants said that it was very creative and much more creative than expected with the handling of clubs with the resources they could. But with that being said, people also weren't as involved as last year, as people couldn't go in person for particular meetings and things like that. The fifth theme being that students were confident in Marist's handling of COVID let me rephrase. That students are confident in Marist's handling for the spring semester and should be relatively similar. One of the participants said, "I'm confident in Marist's handling of pandemic for the following semester," and another said, "Marist did things that weren't exactly great. Marist comparatively did a much better job of controlling outbreaks than other university and colleges, kept our tuition the same amount, did really well, and what was best for us." And so, again, some of the unexpected findings, some people were very confused by the COVID dashboard and very frustrated. Others found the dashboard very simple but good enough. Very few Marist staff members, example RAs, RDs, were on the same page for the rules or the punishments. Clubs and activities were more successful than initially thought, and some thought that clubs weren't even going to happen this semester, and that Marist exceeded a lot of people's expectations with handling of COVID.
So to begin with our discussion prior to arrival, these are the questions, or this is an analysis of what we were left with after our participants said what they believed before arriving. Participants acknowledged that there were challenges and faults in Marist's approach to on-campus learning, but agreed that Marist overall did a decent job. Now, before arriving to campus, students had a pretty open mind to Marist's fall semester, though we did have 2 participants that considered a gap year pending an online semester, which we anticipated some fallback from the Marist's plan. An on-campus semester also changed their expectations, where they believed that they'd be solely confined to their rooms when not in class, no social events, clubs, recreation activities, if not limited, and students were pleasantly surprised by this not being the case. After the fall semester, they agreed that there was a wide variety of class types. Students each had their own opinion of what class type worked best for them. Participation was far less on things such as clubs, social activities, but participants believed that the school did the best they could. The main issues students said were the lack of Marist's clarity and communication. They understood that due to the pandemic, there was a severity in the rules that they were given, but they believed that many times the school interpreted the rules differently by each staff member, and it led to a miscommunication among students, and especially students that were trying to follow the right rules. They expressed that they wanted to follow these rules, but the rules seemed to be kept changing. And overall, participants believed Marist did well, but they needed to communicate more clearly.